It started with silence. Not the kind you get late at night when the city sleeps, but the kind that feels alive, pressing in on you, carrying secrets. I was leaning against the rain-streaked window of my office when the phone rang. A single call that would drag me into a case I'd come to know as the silent witness. The voice on the other end was tight, professional, trying not to betray nerves. It was the precinct sergeant telling me about a woman who'd been found in a downtown apartment, gone without a sound, no forced entry, no trace of a struggle. The kicker? Someone saw it happen, a neighbor across the way. But here's the twist. She hadn't said a single word about it, not to the police, not to anyone, just sat there with her lips sealed, staring out her window. That silence was my first clue. As a detective, I've learned people keep quiet for two reasons: fear or guilt. And both can be lethal. By the time I arrived at the apartment building, the rain had washed the streets slick. Neon signs flickered like dying stars, throwing red and blue reflections across puddles. I climbed the stairwell, the walls sweating from humidity and neglect. The door to 4B was wide open, yellow tape strung across it like a warning nobody wanted to obey. Inside, the air was heavy. A lamp burned on the nightstand, casting the kind of shadows that make you feel watched. The victim lay on the bed, eyes closed, a picture of calm that didn't belong in a scene like this. No bruises, no signs of violence. Almost like she'd just stopped. But nothing in this city stops without reason. I moved slow, cataloguing every detail. A spilled glass on the nightstand, water soaking into a book left half open, curtains drawn tight even though the window was cracked. And on the floor, near the dresser, something caught the light, a single earring. Gold, delicate, out of place. That's when I heard it. A faint creak. I turned and found her, the witness. She was standing just beyond the doorway, wrapped in a grey cardigan like armor, eyes fixed on the body. She didn't flinch when I asked her name, didn't blink when I told her who I was. She just whispered, "I saw everything." But when I pressed her, she clammed up. No details, no descriptions, nothing. Just silence. That silence burned at me. Why admit she saw something, only to say nothing more? That's not fear. That's something deeper. I pulled out a chair from the kitchen, sat across from her. She lit a cigarette with hands that didn't shake. The smoke curled in the dim light, filling the silence she wouldn't. I asked again what she'd seen. She just stared past me, out the window at the opposite building. It was then I noticed her line of sight. The apartment across the way, curtains half drawn, lights dim, but the faint shadow of someone moving inside, someone watching us back. I stood, moved to the window, but by the time I looked, the shadow was gone. The hairs on my neck bristled. Whoever was in that other apartment knew we were here, and maybe they knew the witness wasn't talking for a reason. Back in my office later that night, I poured myself a drink and replayed it all in my head. Cases don't usually start this quiet. Usually you've got noise, screams, arguments, gunshots, but this one, it started with silence. And silence can be louder than anything if you listen close enough. The next morning, I pulled the victim's file. Her name was Evelyn Hart, early 30s, librarian by day, lived alone, no family in town, no record, no enemies on paper, but people like that, people who blend into the wallpaper, are often hiding something worth killing for. I went back to the apartment building, raincoat pulled tight against the drizzle. The halls smelled of old paint and damp wood. I started knocking on doors, asking the neighbors what they'd seen, what they'd heard. Most said nothing. One old man swore he'd heard a piano playing from Evelyn's apartment late that night, even though there was no piano inside. Another neighbor mentioned a man visiting her sometimes, never staying long. Tall, sharp suit, always wore gloves. Gloves. That detail stuck. Gloves mean planning. Gloves mean someone didn't want to leave fingerprints. I filed it away, but the real lead was still the silent witness. She was the key. I went back to her door, knocked until she let me in. The apartment was tidy, too tidy, like she didn't actually live there. She offered me coffee she never drank herself. The whole place felt like a stage set, waiting for the curtain to fall. I asked again why she wouldn't talk. She leaned in close, voice so low I had to strain to hear it. Because he's still watching. That sent a chill through me. I pressed for more, but she shook her head, retreating into silence. I left her apartment restless. My gut told me she knew more than she'd ever admit, and that across the street, behind those half-drawn curtains, someone was making sure of it. Later that night, I staked out the building from my car. Cigarette smoke fogged the windshield, rain ticking against the roof. At 11:42 sharp, a figure appeared in the window across from hers. Just a silhouette, tall and lean, moving with purpose. I raised my camera, snapped a shot. But before I could get another, the light cut out, plunging the window into darkness. I leaned back, staring at the Polaroid developing in my hand. Just a shadow, but shadows always belong to someone. The city hummed outside, restless, indifferent. I thought of Evelyn Hart lying still in that bed, her life snuffed out with surgical precision. And I thought of the witness, lips sealed, eyes haunted, trapped in the silence she'd built around herself. This case wasn't about what people said. It was about what they didn't. And I was going to tear through that silence, even if it meant walking straight into the dark. The next morning, I pulled strings down at the precinct, asked for surveillance reports on the building across from the victims. Turns out, one of the apartments was rented under a fake name. No credit history, no job, no trace. Just cash payments every month. That's not a tenant. That's a cover. I drove back to the scene, planning to check it out myself. But when I got there, something stopped me cold. The witness's door was wide open, and inside, the place was empty. No furniture, no clothes, nothing. Like she'd never lived there at all. I froze in the doorway, rain dripping off my coat, staring at the hollow shell of an apartment. The silent witness had vanished. The hollow apartment echoed with nothing but the sound of dripping rain from the hallway window. The witness, my only real thread in this case, was gone. No trace of a hurried exit, no overturned furniture, just absence. And absence can be louder than a scream. As a detective, I knew what that meant. Either she ran because she was scared, or someone made sure she disappeared. Both options spelled trouble. I walked the room slowly, taking in the details most would miss. The smell of bleach hit me first. Sharp, artificial, desperate. Whoever cleared this place out wanted to erase every fingerprint, every memory, but they weren't perfect. Near the window, I spotted a faint scuff on the sill, like something had been dragged through hastily and caught between the cracks of the old floorboards, a matchbook. I picked it up, brushed away the dust. The logo read, "The Velvet Room," a nightclub down on 12th. The kind of place where liquor flowed freely, secrets got traded for cash, and people disappeared without anyone asking questions. I slipped the matchbook into my coat pocket and left. By the time I pushed through the Velvet Room's heavy doors, the city was drowning in neon and cigarette smoke. Inside, jazz swirled through the haze, the kind that carried notes of sadness under every brass hit. Women in glittering dresses leaned against the bar. Men with sharp suits and sharper eyes watched from dark corners. I ordered a bourbon and asked the bartender about the matchbook. He froze just long enough for me to know I was on the right trail. Then he leaned in, his voice low. "She was here. The woman you're looking for. Came in 2 nights ago. Met a man. Tall. Gloves on. Even inside. The man in gloves again. My phantom silhouette from the window." The bartender looked away quickly, pouring a drink for another customer, conversation over. That's the thing about places like this. They give you just enough truth to keep you digging, but never enough to make you stop. I scanned the room, and that's when I saw him. Sitting in the far corner, smoke curling around his face like a veil. Tall, lean, gloves still on, even with a drink in hand. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't have to. He already knew I was here. I made my way across the floor, every eye in the club tracking me without moving. I slid into the seat opposite him. His face stayed in the shadows, but his voice carried the kind of calm that hides sharp edges. "You shouldn't be here, detective." That word coming from his mouth sent a jolt through me. He knew exactly who I was, and if he knew me, then he knew what I was after. "I hear you've been keeping company with a woman who's got a talent for silence," I said. He smiled, faint, humorless. Some people see too much. The smart ones learn to keep quiet. The others, well, they don't last long. There it was, not a threat, a statement. I leaned forward. What happened to her? He tapped ash into a tray, slow, deliberate. Sometimes silence isn't a choice, detective. Sometimes it's survival. Before I could press further, 2 heavy hands clamped on my shoulders. Club security. They didn't ask politely. They dragged me out the back door and left me in the rain, bruised pride and unanswered questions weighing me down. But I'd gotten what I came for. Confirmation. The witness wasn't just scared, she was hunted, and the man in gloves was pulling the strings. The next day I pulled traffic cam footage near the Velvet Room. Hours of grainy black and white, but eventually I caught it. The witness leaving with him. He had her by the arm, leading her to a black sedan. No struggle, no fight. Just obedience. Fear makes you compliant. I ran the plates. Fake. No surprise there. But the car had been spotted near the victim's apartment 2 nights before Evelyn Hart's death. Too much overlap to ignore. The threads were starting to tangle together. Evelyn, the silent witness. the man in gloves, they weren't separate. They were part of the same web. The question was, who spun it? I took a walk to clear my head, rain slicking the pavement, city lights smearing into one another. I thought about Evelyn Hart, a librarian with no enemies on paper. I thought about the silent witness, a woman who vanished without leaving a ripple. And I thought about the man in gloves, always present, never caught. Something didn't fit. People don't just disappear like smoke unless someone wants them to. I went back to Evelyn's apartment one more time, walked the scene again, slow, deliberate. And that's when I noticed something I'd missed the first time. On the bookshelf, tucked behind rows of classics, was a hollow space. Inside, an envelope. It was addressed to no one. Inside, a single photograph. Evelyn, standing with the silent witness, smiling. Together. Not strangers. Friends. That changed everything. If Evelyn and the witness knew each other, then silence wasn't about fear. It was about loyalty. She wasn't just hiding from the man in gloves. She was protecting something. Maybe someone. I slipped the photo into my pocket, my heart beating heavy against my ribs. That was when my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a voice I knew all too well poured through the line. The man in gloves. "You're digging in the wrong graves, detective. Walk away or you'll find yourself buried in one." The line went dead. I stood in Evelyn's empty apartment, the weight of that threat pressing in like the damp city air. Cases like this don't come with warnings unless you're getting close. And if I was close, then the next move was his. I poured myself another drink back at the office, staring at the photo of Evelyn and the witness. Two women, tied together by something strong enough to defy death and silence. But what I found next changed everything. The photograph burned a hole in my desk all night. Two women side by side, Evelyn and the silent witness. Friends. Maybe more than that. And if there was one thing I knew as a detective, it was that bonds like that don't end with silence. They end with secrets. By morning, the city felt heavier. The fog clung low over the streets, swallowing headlights whole, and every alley seemed to watch me. I carried that photograph in my pocket like a talisman, or maybe a curse. Either way, it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the truth. I went back to the precinct, leaned on a favor from an old contact in records. We dug deeper into Evelyn Hart's life. Bank statements, library schedules, phone records. All normal. Too normal. But the silent witness? She had no record at all. No driver's license, no employment, no bills. It was like she didn't exist. People don't just erase themselves unless someone's helping them. That thought sent me back to the Velvet Room. I needed answers, and the man in gloves wasn't going to hand them to me neatly wrapped. This time, I didn't sit at the bar. I went straight to the back, through the red curtains where the real business of the club got done. The back room was thick with smoke, men hunched over card tables, dice clattering, money exchanging hands. But in the far corner, I found something better than chips or cash. A ledger. I flipped through the pages. Names, dates, payments, all coded, but I'd seen codes like this before. And there, buried in the middle, was hers, Evelyn Hart. Next to her name, a number. A sum of money too large for a librarian's paycheck. She was on someone's payroll. I snapped a picture with my phone, tucked the ledger back before anyone noticed. But just as I turned to leave, I felt it. A shadow blocking the doorway. The man in gloves. He stood there calm as a priest, eyes like glass. He didn't speak. Just stepped aside, motioned for me to walk out. I should have been relieved he didn't draw a weapon. But there was something worse in his silence. Confidence. The kind of confidence that comes from knowing the game is rigged in your favor. Back on the street, the ledger image on my phone felt heavier than a loaded gun. Evelyn wasn't just a victim. She was tied to something bigger, money laundering, maybe blackmail. And the silent witness knew that's why she kept her mouth shut. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting Evelyn. But Evelyn was already gone. That night, I pored over the ledger again, line by line, until I noticed a pattern. Payments made every Thursday. Same amount, same initials. CK. That was the key. Find CK, and I'd find the hand pulling the strings. I followed the money trail to a high-rise downtown, glass walls gleaming against the rain. The kind of place where the powerful play invisible games. I waited in the lobby until I saw him. A man in a charcoal suit, hair slicked back, moving with the kind of arrogance you can smell a mile away. Caleb Kane. Business consultant, philanthropist on paper, predator underneath. Kane. CK. I tailed him for 3 days. Watched him slip into meetings, watched the man in gloves shadow him like a dog on a leash. Kane wasn't just paying Evelyn, he was controlling her. And if she tried to back out, he had ways of making sure silence was the only option left. On the 4th night, Kane hosted a party at a private lounge uptown. I crashed it. Suit pressed, smile fake, drink untouched. The room glittered with money and lies, and there on Kane's arm was the silent witness, alive. She wore a black dress, eyes blank, like she'd been hollowed out. But the moment they brushed past me, her gaze flicked up, recognition, the faintest crack in her mask. She knew me. She remembered. I slipped out, waited in the alley behind the lounge. When Kane's car pulled up, the man in gloves opened the door, ushering her in. Kane followed, smug and untouchable. I caught her eyes one last time. For a second, they screamed louder than any words. A plea. She wanted out. I followed the car, down winding streets, past the river, to an abandoned warehouse. Classic setup. Inside, I knew, was the truth, or a bullet with my name on it. I parked 2 blocks away, crept in through the side door. The warehouse smelled of rust and gasoline, the kind of place you don't leave unless someone allows it. And there, under the harsh hum of fluorescent lights, Kane stood with the witness at his side. The man in gloves lingered nearby, watchful, silent as always. Kane's voice echoed off the walls. "You think you can just walk away, Evelyn? You think your friend here," he nodded toward the witness, "can protect you with silence forever?" Evelyn. My pulse kicked hard. She wasn't lying cold in that apartment after all. The body I'd seen, it hadn't been her. It was a setup, a decoy. Evelyn Hart was alive. And the witness wasn't silent because of fear. She was silent because the truth would shatter everything. I leaned closer, straining to hear. Kane was pacing, his words sharp. "You owe me, both of you. Without me, you don't exist. You'll keep working until I say otherwise, or you'll vanish for real this time." That was the final piece. Evelyn and the witness weren't just victims, they were assets, tools in Kane's operation. And now, caught between loyalty and survival, they were breaking apart. My foot shifted on the metal grate, a clang. Too loud. The man in gloves turned, eyes locking onto mine. His hand dipped into his coat. I only had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and lose them, or step out and play my hand early. I stepped out. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, voice steady. "Looks like the party started without me." The witness gasped. Evelyn froze. Kane smiled that smug, shark grin. "Detective Logan," he said, "always late to the dance." The man in gloves drew his weapon, and that was when the whole case exploded. The man in gloves leveled his pistol at me, his movements precise, clinical. I'd seen professionals like him before, the kind that never missed, the kind that never flinched. My hand hovered near my coat pocket, where my own piece rested, but I knew one wrong twitch would turn the warehouse into a coffin. Kane stood between us, calm, arrogant, as though he owned every second of my life. Evelyn clung to the witness, both of them frozen, eyes wide. The silence in that place was suffocating, broken only by the low hum of the lights. "Put it away," Kane told him. "The detective's useful." The man in gloves hesitated, then lowered his weapon, though his eyes never left me. "Useful how?" I asked, voice steady, though my pulse was racing. Kane smiled. "Because you'll carry the story I want carried. Evelyn here tried to leave. The witness helped her. And you'll tell the city they vanished. You'll make their silence permanent." I stepped closer, the echo of my boots filling the warehouse. "Funny thing about silence, Kane, it doesn't last. It cracks, it breaks, and when it does, everything spills out." Evelyn's eyes flicked to me then, desperate, begging. The witness gripped her hand, tight, unshakable, that bond again, stronger than fear, stronger than Kane. The man in gloves tensed, sensing the shift. He raised his pistol again. This time he wasn't waiting. But Evelyn moved first. She shoved Kane, sending him stumbling. The witness screamed. I drew, fired once. The shot tore through the silence, hitting the man in gloves square in the shoulder. He spun, dropped his weapon, snarling in pain. Chaos erupted. Kane lunged for Evelyn, but I intercepted, driving him back against a steel beam. His smile twisted into a snarl, his fists desperate. We grappled, the smell of rust and blood filling the air. "Do you know who I am?" he spat. "Yeah," I growled. "A man who hides behind silence." I slammed him into the beam, cuffed him before he could breathe another threat. The man in gloves staggered toward us, clutching his wound, but the witness had his pistol now. For the first time, her silence broke, not with words, but with the sharp click of a safety being switched off. He froze, then collapsed to his knees. The echo of footsteps filled the warehouse as backup arrived. My backup. I'd called it in before following the trail. Cops swarmed the place, guns drawn, voices loud. Kane was dragged out cursing, spitting venom. The man in gloves was taken to an ambulance under heavy guard. But Evelyn and the witness, they just stood there. Two women who had been ghosts, suddenly real again under the harsh warehouse lights. Later at the precinct, the story unraveled. Evelyn had been working for Kane, forced into it after he dug up a debt she couldn't pay. She funneled him information, laundered money through library accounts of all things. The silent witness, her name was Clara, had been her shield, her shadow. They staged Evelyn's death to break free, but Kane caught on. Silence was their only weapon, until it wasn't. When the dust settled, Kane was locked away, the man in gloves facing charges that would keep him buried. Evelyn and Clara disappeared into protective custody, their silence traded for safety. I walked out into the night, the city damp with rain, the neon lights buzzing faintly overhead. Cases like this don't leave you clean. They stick, they whisper, they remind you that silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a language all its own. As I lit a cigarette, I thought about Clara's words, back in that apartment, because he's still watching. She was right. Someone is always watching. In this city, silence isn't safety. It's a sentence. But sometimes when silence finally breaks, it screams loud enough to bring the walls down. I exhaled smoke into the night, listening to the city breathe, restless and unrepentant. This was the silent witness mystery. And I was Detective Logan, the man who cracked it open. The next case? It's already out there, waiting, in the shadows, watching. And when it comes, I'll be there. Because in a city like this, silence never lasts forever.